With the announcement of Pokémon Legends ZA, the community is busy speculating about the new characters, including the return of AZ, the expanded Lumio City map, the plot of the games, and of course, whether the final evolutions of the three starters, Meganium, Emboar, and Feraligatr, will receive brand new Mega Evolutions, or if they'll follow in the footsteps of Legends Arceus and introduce regional forms. A good chunk of you seem to largely be splits, but overall preferring regional forms. But I won't be weighing in on that today, much less designing new art for new forms or megas in this video. Though I'd like to, so let me know down below if you'd like to see that as well, and maybe an upcoming video will feature those. But today, the question of whether these starters are getting regional forms specifically led into a larger inquiry for me. Will Pokémon Legends ZA feature any new regional forms, period? That's what we're going to be focusing on. The future of this gimmick as a whole, and what we might expect based on how Pokémon has handled this genre of Pokémon design for the past few years. So let's get into it. Once again, the showcase of a mix of old starters, in this case Chikorita, Tepig, and Totodile, invites easy comparisons to the precedent set by the one other Legends game, Pokémon Legends Arceus, where each of the three Hisui Pokémon got regional forms of their own upon reaching their final evolution. After all, we once again have a trio of starters who haven't received much love. No regional forms, Mega Evolutions, Gigantamax forms, even Z-moves. So while it is tempting to predict that we'll get regional forms for these guys simply on that basis alone, I would actually argue that it's less likely than you might think, given the state of regional forms as a whole in 2025. Meaning, I'm not sure if these starters or any other Pokemon in ZA is likely to get a collision form. So let me explain. To examine this, it might be worth going back to the beginning in Pokemon Sun and Moon, where this mechanic was first introduced to the franchise. For those games, it was a huge part of its marketing leading up to release, with a staggering 18 Pokemon receiving some sort of adaptation, justified in-universe by the geographic isolation and uniqueness of the Alola region. Sure, they were all Kanto Pokemon, but they made up a big part of Alola's identity and appeared on a wide variety of trainer teams throughout the region. I'd argue that they were the clearest, most iconic gimmick of the Alola region, even surpassing the replacement of gyms and the introduction of Z-moves. They were so popular, Pokemon decided to bring back and even expand upon the mechanic right as the franchise moved to the Switch. In Galar, we're treated to an even larger pool, 20 variants, now expanded to a larger variety of prior generations, plus 6 brand new Pokemon who could only be obtained by evolving one of these variants, regional evolutions, so to speak. And then Legends Arceus followed suit, 16 variants plus 2 regional evolutions, all of whom played major roles in the games as Ride or Lord Pokemon. Plus, of course, the starters. For this entry specifically, regional forms made a lot of sense. While past regional forms played on the idea of adaptation due to geographic diversity, Hisuian forms did so with time. We were seeing a time period far before the contemporary setting of literally all of the other games, meaning we got a chance to see older subspecies of Pokemon, before they could have gone extinct and adapted to the changing climate and industrialization of the Hisui region as it became Sinnoh and became the forms that we know today. It was also through the end of Generation 8 that I think this gimmick reached its peak, with an entire game largely built around these variants. However, the most recent and current generation, so far the Paldea games of Scarlet and Violet, have muddied this mechanic's future quite a bit. Aside from the instance of Paldean Wooper, heavily featured in the game's marketing, and its hugely popular regional evolution of Clodsire, we only got one other regional form, Paldean Tauros, though it did admittedly have 3 forms. Though by this point, regional forms kind of felt like an afterthought. The game much preferred the brand new Paradoxes as a way of breathing life into older Pokemon, and even the DLC setting Kitakami, our first chance to see a new Japanese-inspired area since Generation 4, kind of bucked the trend of regional forms, instead giving us Poltergeist and Blood Moon Ursaluna. Rather than label them Kitakamian Poltergeist and Ursaluna, Pokemon decided to riff on the original precedent set by regional forms, and instead have these 2 variations of past Pokemon be, for one, an original Pokemon who evolved convergently to Poltergeist, and 2, the incredibly unique instance of Blood Moon Ursaluna, which was sort of a diet regional form, not a drastic type change, but essentially just a form change that is driven by geography. The Pokédex even confirms this. It crossed the sea and drifted ashore in a new land, Surviving in this place led it to take on a unique appearance and gain special powers. So now we come to Pokémon Legends ZA, and before you say anything, no, I'm not suggesting that just because Generation 9, a generation that isn't even over, has slowed down on their production of regional forms, that means that Pokemon is done creating new entries in this mechanic forever. In fact, it's too soon to even tell, given that even with Sun and Moon, we didn't get the reveal of regional forms until months after the games were announced. However, I think key factors point to not getting regional forms. Firstly, of the old Pokemon that we did see in the trailer, only one was different, AZ's Floette, known as the Eternal Flower Floette. This seems to be a diet variant similar to Blood Moon or Saluna, a Pokemon whose type does not change at all, but whose appearance and stats have been augmented by local circumstances. Here, I would wager it's due to radiation from the Eternal Flower, the ultimate weapon that AZ 3,000 years ago unleashed, and was once again activated by Lysander in the climax of Pokemon X and Y. Though the effects weren't nearly as devastating as in AZ's time, the weapon in X and Y still did go off, and undoubtedly had some kind of effect on the Kalos region. What effect was that? Well, we don't know yet, but I'm sure it'll be explored in Pokemon ZA, which we can assume at this point takes place 10 to 15 years after the events of Pokemon X and Y, based on the slight updates to Lumiose City. In my mind, that's enough time for something as drastic as the burst of energy emitted by the weapon to have great effect on the region and its Pokemon. What if Eternal Flower Floette isn't the only Pokemon who's been altered by the weapon? What if we get a new subsect of diet regional forms, similar to Blood Moon or Saluna, or this Floette, perhaps known as Eternal Flower Form Pokemon? These could be powerful, irradiated Pokemon similar to Alphas from Legends Arceus, perhaps sporting the same white, blue, and red color scheme that Floette does. That would be interesting and something that I could see Pokemon doing, as it strikes the balance between introducing something new for this game, which I know that they probably want to do, while not having a slew of 10 to 20 new regional forms, like in Galar or Alola. Plus, I'm not sure that it would even make sense to have new regional forms in the Lumiose of ZA, since, as I mentioned, true regional forms have always been driven by drastic differences in geography or time. The Pokemon in Alola look different due to the tropical climate of this never-before-seen far-off region. The Pokemon in Hisui look different because Legends Arceus takes place some 200 years before the modern day. Yet, ZA is neither. We've been to Lumiose City before, and by the looks of it, again, this version doesn't seem to take place far before or after the last time we were there. Perhaps that's enough time for a small crop of Pokemon to be affected by the radiation from the ultimate weapon 12 years ago, but certainly not enough time for a larger crop to drastically take on different forms via adaptation and natural selection. If we do get regional forms, I would wager that it would be much more likely to be new Pokemon from generations 7 through 9, since we haven't seen how they fare in Kalos before. But don't expect any Pokemon we previously saw in X and Y to look any different. And as for the starters, well, that's where it gets tricky. And as I said, I'd like to hear what you think. Personally, I'm going to bet my money on no to any regional forms, them included. As I said, I would like to see, and could fairly confidently predict, some sort of new mechanic that's a spin on regional forms like Eternal Flower forms. Maybe not even that, since I'm fairly certain ZA will put much more concerted effort into the return of Mega Evolution, with likely a lot more brand new Megas for Pokemon from Generation 6 onwards, or those who haven't gotten one before. And yes, that includes the starters. If the energy from the ultimate weapon had any effect, it would make total sense that a crop of never-before-seen Megas would be one of the primary ones. Not only is Mega Evolution deeply tied to the Kalos region that we know through lore and mechanics already, but it also remains one of the most popular battle mechanics introduced in the series ever. So I expect Pokemon to take full advantage of it. But what do you think? Are you hopeful for the return of regional forms, or are you, like me, expecting Pokemon to focus on something else? Let me know down below. Also, celebrate the new look for the channel and the next chapter of Tam Valley by becoming a channel supporter. You can check out my recently completely overhauled Patreon with the link right down below, where you can join for $1, $3, or $5 a month and receive a variety of perks, like your name in the credits of videos and access to an exclusive channel on my Discord, where you get sneak peeks for upcoming videos in my Fakemon region project, which is in the works. Your support would mean the world to me, and even a contribution of $1 a month goes a long way in making some really great projects happen. Thank you for considering. and thank you to all current patrons and channel members, especially Guardian patron KuroBlitz. I'll see you next time for more content.